Brad had no idea what he was getting himself into when he casually suggested to Zyra, his alien wife, that they start a family. He'd envisioned something sweet, simple, maybe a little traditional: one child, a little house, and some quiet nights. But Zyra's laugh shattered that peaceful fantasy in an instant. "One child?" She laughed, her deep alien voice booming. "Why, that's laughable, Brad." She shook her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Don't you know? A true family isn't built on such a weak foundation. One child is barely enough to count as a blessing." Brad blinked, trying to process her words. "Wait, what do you mean weak foundation? I thought one child is enough, right? You know, simple, manageable." Zyra's eyes sparkled with confusion. "Oh no, Brad. You Earthlings are so cute with your small families. But my people? We value strength, and strength is measured by how many children we can raise. The more, the better." Brad's mind raced. Strength? He'd never heard anyone talk about children like that before. "Wait, you're saying you want more than one?" Zyra's smile widened. "Of course. You see, our family units are like fortresses. The more children we have, the stronger the family becomes. And my people believe in strength, true, undeniable strength. So no, Brad. One child? That's nothing. I'll be satisfied with 10. 10? Brad's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "You want 10 kids?" She nodded with a serious look on her face. "That's the minimum. 10 is the number of strength. We're not just building a family here. We're building an empire." Brad stood there, mouth open, unable to say anything. 10 children? Was she joking? How could anyone possibly have 10 kids, let alone want them? "You're serious, right? 10? He finally managed to ask. "Absolutely," she responded, her tone unwavering. "In my culture, children are seen as the future warriors of the family. You think one child is enough to carry the weight of a family? No, Brad. We need to raise an army, and that takes 10. Brad swallowed, trying to wrap his head around what she was saying. Raise an army? He had no idea his suggestion of starting a family would turn into some kind of military recruitment program. Was this how alien societies viewed family building? Okay, I get it. But why 10? Zyra stepped closer, her voice softening slightly. It's simple. 10 children are the number that proves a family's strength. The more children we have, the more we multiply our power. And not just in numbers, each child becomes a warrior. They will carry on our legacy. Brad's eyes widened. Warrior children? The more she talked, the more absurd it sounded. Wait, hold on. You want to have 10 kids and then, what? Train them to be warriors? Zyra grinned, completely unfazed by his confusion. Exactly. They're warriors, Brad. From birth. We'll teach them strength, discipline, and how to conquer. It's what my people do. We raise warriors, not just children. Brad felt a cold sweat forming on his brow. This wasn't what he signed up for. A few minutes ago, he was thinking of cozy nights with a kid playing with toys. Now, he was being handed a military training manual for infants. He had no idea how to respond to that. But Zyra, he started, trying to find the right words. Do we really need to go that far? I mean, we're talking about 10 kids. That's like a whole army. That's the point, Zyra said, eyes lighting up with excitement. A true family isn't just a group of people. It's a force that can conquer anything. We'll train them. Teach them to fight. They'll be ready to defend our family, our species, and our legacy. Brad stared at her, his mind whirling. He wasn't even sure if this was a dream, a nightmare, or if his wife had just gotten a little too caught up in her species' idea of family. You're not serious about all this, are you? He asked, trying to make light of the situation. Maybe it was all a joke. Zyra, without missing a beat, raised one eyebrow. Brad, you can't be serious about just one child. What would they do? Play with a toy and then become a warrior when they're older? No, no. My people, our people, need more. We need strength. 10 children, Brad. 10 warriors. Brad let out a long breath, trying to keep his composure. The more she spoke, the more ridiculous it sounded. And you think 10 kids is going to solve all our problems? Zyra's eyes twinkled with mischief. Not solve them, Brad. Overcome them. Destroy them. 10 children will make our family the most powerful in the galaxy. Don't you want that? The absurdity of it all hit Brad in waves. Here he was, a regular guy from Earth, trying to navigate the complicated dynamics of an intergalactic marriage, and now he was being told to have 10 children to prove his strength. Not only that, but those children were supposed to be warriors from day one. The entire concept was so over the top that Brad wasn't sure if he should laugh, cry, or just sit down and rethink his entire life. I don't know, Zyra, he finally said. 10 kids? We're gonna need a bigger house. And a lot more diapers. Zyra just grinned wider, as if this was the perfect solution. That's the spirit, Brad. You'll see. We'll be a warrior family. Strong. Unstoppable. Brad couldn't help but laugh, though the laugh came out more like a nervous chuckle. Yeah, well, let's hope we can survive the training first. He looked at his wife, trying to find a little bit of sanity in this insane idea. But as he watched Zyra's gleaming eyes, he realized she was completely serious. 10 kids. Warriors. It was a lot to digest. All right, Brad finally said, forcing a grin. Let's start with one, okay? Just one kid. We can test the waters before we start building our army. Zyra frowned slightly but then shrugged. One is better than none, I suppose. But mark my words, Brad, we'll have 10. The family will be strong, and we'll raise them to be warriors, just like we're meant to. Brad looked at her, a mixture of bewilderment and amusement in his eyes. We'll see about that. Brad stood in the middle of their apartment, feeling the weight of the conversation from moments ago still hanging over him. Zyra, with her alien conviction and determination, was still talking about the 10 children they would have. He had thought proposing one child would be the start of their family planning, but instead, it had turned into a bizarre mission to create an army of future warriors. Now, after Zyra's insistent demands, Brad couldn't help but feel the pressure to somehow make this work. All right, he muttered, pacing the room. Let's just figure out what needs to be done here. One child. That's all I'm asking for, and we'll take it from there. He didn't know how else to deal with the situation, so he resigned himself to simply moving forward with whatever alien nonsense came next. Zyra, with her strange alien logic, was already drawing up plans. She was at the kitchen table, hunched over a tablet, tapping away furiously as she plotted what seemed to be the most convoluted fertility test Brad could ever imagine. Brad eyed her nervously. Zyra, what exactly is that you're working on? Zyra looked up, her antennae twitching with excitement. It's a fertility test. My people use this method to measure the strength of our bond. It's necessary to ensure that you can produce powerful offspring. Brad's stomach churned. A fertility test? You're telling me we need to do more of that stuff? Zyra's eyes sparkled with determination. Yes. You see, it's important that we confirm your capability. Only then will we know if we're truly ready to raise our warrior children. She seemed completely unbothered by the awkwardness of the situation, as though this was just another regular Tuesday in her world. Brad, on the other hand, was increasingly uncomfortable. But Zyra, do we really need a test for that? I mean, I know what I'm capable of. He paused. Well, mostly. Zyra looked at him with a raised eyebrow. You humans are so modest. You're worried about tests? In my culture, strength and fertility are measured through actions, not just words. Brad's face turned red. The last thing he wanted was to have some alien fertility test he didn't understand. But Zyra wasn't about to let up. The test is simple, she continued, smiling as though she were explaining something completely mundane. I'll need to see how well you can perform under pressure, Under pressure? Brad echoed, not sure whether he was more confused or horrified. What does that even mean? It means, she said, that I need to see how well you'll handle the idea of raising 10 children. Warriors. You'll need to prove you have the stamina, Brad. The endurance. If you can't handle the test, how can I trust you with the responsibility of an army? Brad let out a long sigh. This wasn't what he signed up for. They hadn't even gotten past the idea of one child, and now she was talking about the stamina to handle 10, all while calling them warriors. He was being asked to prove his fertility, his ability to make children not just normal kids, but future warriors. I can't believe we're doing this, Brad muttered. Okay, fine. What exactly do you need from me? Zyra's grin widened. First, we need to determine your output. If you can't produce a strong seed, then we'll have to reconsider our plans for the army. Brad's face flushed. He had no idea what she meant by output, or how she expected him to prove anything. It all felt like one big joke, but the problem was Zyra wasn't laughing. She was deadly serious about this. And Brad knew his alien wife wasn't going to back down. Okay, Zyra, Brad said, trying to sound confident. Let's just get this over with. With the test underway, Brad quickly realized that he had no idea what kind of test he was supposed to be involved in. There were devices on the counter that looked far too complicated. Some of them looked like they belonged in a laboratory, not in a home with a loving wife. Zyra was explaining them with such enthusiasm that Brad almost forgot how utterly awkward the situation was. This one, she said, pointing to a sleek metallic device, will test your speed. This one measures your intensity, and this last one. She paused, holding up what looked like a bizarrely shaped alien tool. Will track your endurance. It's important that we make sure you're physically capable of raising strong warriors. Brad stared at the strange assortment of objects, his mind racing. Endurance? He asked, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. We're really going this far? You'll thank me later, Zyra said, her voice all too calm, clearly unconcerned about the strangeness of it all. This is what my people do. We test everything. To make sure we're capable of building strength. Brad gulped. He wasn't sure what was more disturbing, the fact that his wife was so into this or the realization that he was standing in the middle of what could only be described as an alien fertility laboratory. But there was no backing out now. All right, Brad said, trying to swallow his nervousness. Let's just get it over with. Zyra handed him the first device, which was smooth and cool to the touch. It didn't look particularly intimidating, but Brad had a strong feeling it was going to make him feel far more awkward than he'd ever imagined possible. You're ready, Brad? Zyra asked, her voice now a little too enthusiastic. Brad cleared his throat. Yeah. I think so. As he went through the tests, each more ridiculous than the last, Brad couldn't help but wonder how the hell he'd ended up here. What had started as a casual conversation about having one child had spiraled into an absurd race to prove his fertility to an alien species. By the time Zyra was satisfied with the results, Brad's head was spinning. There were far too many gadgets and terms he didn't understand, and he felt like he'd just run a marathon without leaving the room. When Zyra finally turned off the last device, she smiled in satisfaction. Perfect, she said, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. Now we know you're capable. We can start planning for 10. Brad didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The whole thing was ridiculous, but somehow, he couldn't help but be intrigued by Zyra's persistence. As awkward as it had been, there was something strangely charming about her absolute belief in the process. Well, that's great, he muttered, still recovering from the whirlwind of alien fertility gadgets. But, can we maybe just have one kid first? Let's test that out before we start building our army. Zyra just smiled, unfazed. One is good. But remember, Brad, 10 is the number of strength. We'll get there eventually. Brad stared at her, feeling a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. This was going to be one wild ride. Brad sat at the dining table, his head spinning. After what felt like an eternity of fertility tests, weird alien gadgets, and Zyra's relentless enthusiasm for having 10 children, he was now in the middle of the most absurd conversation of his life. He couldn't believe he was still discussing it, but Zyra wouldn't let it go. She was insistent that 10 children were the only way to prove their strength and family worth. So 10, Brad said, rubbing his temples. That's still the plan? Zyra nodded with unshaken conviction. Of course. It's the minimum. We need 10 strong children to build our legacy. She sat across from him, looking entirely too pleased with herself. The more children we have, the stronger our family becomes. You humans talk about legacy, but you have no idea what it means to really carry it. Brad sighed. I get the idea, Zyra. But the idea of raising warriors? That's not exactly what I had in mind when we talked about starting a family. Zyra leaned forward, her voice taking on a more serious tone. We raise warriors, Brad. Not children. They will carry our bloodline. Their purpose will be clear: to conquer, to grow, to protect. 10 warriors will make us a force that cannot be defeated. Brad blinked, trying to make sense of it all. You really want to have 10 kids, and then start training them for battle before they can even walk? Exactly, Zyra replied without hesitation. Training starts early. The sooner they learn to defend themselves, the better. We will raise them to be strong, like my people. Every child will be trained for a specific purpose. Some will be strategists, others soldiers. Our family will be unstoppable. Brad couldn't help but laugh, though it came out more like a nervous chuckle. I'm starting to feel like I'm not just going to be a dad. I'm going to be their drill sergeant. Zyra grinned, clearly thrilled by the idea. Yes, exactly. We'll be a team. The greatest team the galaxy has ever seen. Brad shook his head, still in disbelief. Zyra, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. You're talking about 10 kids, warriors, military strategy. I can barely manage to make it through a week of work without losing my mind. Zyra didn't falter. That's because you're thinking too small. You need to shift your perspective, Brad. We're not just raising children, we're raising leaders. They will change the course of history. Brad's mind was reeling. Was she serious? She was already planning out their future family like some kind of military operation, and he was expected to go along with it. He thought about his own family growing up, how they barely made it through Christmas without a family squabble or two. But Zyra? She was talking about an army. So what's the plan now? Brad asked, trying to steer the conversation towards some semblance of normalcy. We're going to start training our kids right after they're born? Zyra nodded again, excitement radiating from her. Of course. From day one, they will begin their training. We'll teach them to harness their strength, to fight for what's ours. Their minds will be sharp, their bodies stronger than you can imagine. They'll be our legacy, Brad. Great, Brad muttered, rubbing his eyes. I'm just trying to picture this, my kid, in a training camp, running obstacle courses while I'm trying to get them to sleep through the night. Zyra's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were already thinking about logistics. Sleep is important, of course. But there's no time to waste. Every second we spend nurturing their physical and mental strength is vital. They will be the ultimate warriors, Brad. You'll see. Brad leaned back in his chair, trying to wrap his head around everything Zyra had just said. He was used to the usual parenting worries, sleep schedules, diaper changes, baby food, but this was something entirely different. Raising warriors? The whole thing sounded so outrageous, and yet Zyra was deadly serious about it. Okay, Brad said, holding up his hands in surrender. I get it. We're going to have these kids, and they're going to be soldiers. But what about? I don't know, human stuff? I don't want to raise little robots. I want them to have normal lives too. Zyra shook her head, her expression a mix of concern and amusement. Human normal doesn't make sense to me, Brad. Our species has survived because we focus on strength. Strength in numbers, strength in training, strength in purpose. If we let them be normal, they won't be able to survive. They'll be weak. Brad was struggling to find his words. I get the idea, but you're not thinking about what this will do to them. 10 kids, and all of them raised to be soldiers. There has to be more to life than just fighting, right? Zaira paused for a moment, looking thoughtful. I never said there wouldn't be love, Brad. Warriors love their families. But their love comes with purpose. Everything they do will have meaning. Their lives won't be wasted. Brad stared at her, speechless. His wife was convinced that a purposeful life was one of constant battle. But he wasn't sure he could embrace that vision. He couldn't help but wonder, was it possible to raise a family, to have children, and not force them into such an extreme mindset? He wasn't sure. Zaira, he said slowly, his voice laced with doubt. What if they don't want to be warriors? What if they want something else? Zaira's face softened, but only a little. Brad, every child has the potential to be great. And with our guidance, they'll want this life. They will understand. It's in their blood. We're training them to be the best, Brad. Why would they want anything else? Brad swallowed hard. What if they don't want this, Zaira? What if they just want a chance to be themselves? To make their own choices, their own path? Zaira's smile returned, though it was more calculated now. That's why we'll teach them strength. They'll be free to choose their path, but they will do so from a place of power. Brad nodded slowly, not entirely convinced. He could see Zaira's reasoning, but there was something about it that didn't sit well with him. The more she talked about strength and warriors, the more it seemed like she was shaping their future kids into something they might not want to be. I just want to make sure we're not raising them to be something they don't want to be, Brad said quietly. Zaira reached across the table, gently touching his hand. I promise you, Brad, they will love this life. They will thank us for raising them with strength. And together, we'll be unstoppable. Brad stared at her, his heart heavy with the weight of what she was asking. 10 children. Warriors. A family built on strength. It was a lot to take in, and even more to accept. But one thing was clear, Zaira wasn't going to back down. He just hoped they could find some balance between warriors and a family, before he lost his mind. Brad sat on the couch, his mind still reeling from the whirlwind of discussions with Zaira. 10 children. Warriors. Strength. It all felt like an impossible task, one that he was being dragged into with no choice but to go along with it. Zaira had been relentless in her vision, unwavering in her belief that this was the only way to build a family. But now, after everything, Brad couldn't shake the feeling that he was trapped in a world where every decision about their future family was being dictated by some alien idea of what strength meant. Brad, Zaira said, interrupting his thoughts, her voice soft but filled with the same unwavering confidence she'd had since the beginning. You're still thinking about this the wrong way. Brad turned to face her, rubbing his temples. I don't know how else to think about it, Zaira. 10 kids? Warriors? I can't even get my head around the idea that we're having one, let alone an army. She smiled, sitting down next to him. You're not seeing the bigger picture, Brad. This isn't about quantity. It's about quality. Each of our children will be a powerhouse. They'll be strong, powerful, and capable of leading. Our family will be unstoppable. Brad sighed heavily, trying to put his thoughts into words. But I don't want them to just be soldiers or warriors, Zaira. I don't want to raise them with the constant pressure of being some kind of military force. Zaira's expression softened just slightly, though there was still that fire in her eyes. Brad, our children will be whatever they choose to be. But they will have the strength to make those choices. You're seeing it as a burden, but it's really a gift. Strength is freedom. The ability to protect, to conquer, to decide their fate. He shook his head. You're still talking about them like they're tools, like they're meant to fight, to win, to conquer. I get that strength is important to your species, but where does the love fit into all of this? Where does family fit in? Zaira reached for his hand, her touch gentle but firm. It's all part of the same thing, Brad. Family is strength. A strong family isn't built on weakness. We love our children, but we also give them the tools to be the best versions of themselves. To stand tall in any situation. Don't you want them to be powerful? To have the ability to choose their own future, instead of being helpless or dependent? Brad looked at her, his heart torn. He could see the logic in her words, but it didn't sit right with him. He didn't want to just be a provider of strength. He wanted to be a father, a parent. He wanted to raise his kids with love, with laughter, with moments of joy that didn't always revolve around battle and training. But every time he tried to voice these concerns, Zaira countered with her own beliefs, her own idea of what family meant. I want them to be strong, too, Brad said, his voice shaking with frustration. But I also want them to be able to laugh, to play, to experience life beyond the constant pressure of being warriors. Zaira's expression softened even further, but the fire still burned in her eyes. I understand, Brad. You're afraid that their childhood will be taken from them. But we won't take their childhood away. We'll simply teach them how to embrace strength from a young age. They can laugh and play, but they'll know what it means to fight for what they love. Brad paused, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Was it possible to have both? Could he raise children who were warriors, powerful and strong, and still allow them to be children? It seemed impossible, yet Zaira's belief in her methods was undeniable. She wasn't going to change her mind, and neither was he. How do we even start this? Brad asked, his voice quiet, his hands resting in his lap. How do we raise 10 kids, warriors no less, and not lose ourselves in the process? What does that even look like? Zaira smiled, clearly pleased by the question. We start with the basics. We create a foundation, Brad. The first thing is discipline. Our children will understand that strength comes from discipline, training their minds and bodies. We will set boundaries. They will know respect, honor, and the importance of family. But they will also know how to fight for what they believe in. They will learn that strength isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. Brad looked at her, still not fully convinced. And how do we make sure we don't lose ourselves along the way? I don't want to be consumed by this idea of strength that you keep talking about. I want our family to have balance. Zaira's smile softened again, though there was still a glint of determination in her eyes. We will have balance, Brad. Strength isn't the absence of other emotions. It's the ability to control them, to use them to build something greater. We will love each other fiercely, but we will also teach our children the power of resilience, of overcoming challenges, of finding strength within themselves. I want to raise warriors who understand love, who value it just as much as power. Brad leaned back against the couch, his head spinning. He wasn't sure what he believed anymore. He wanted to trust Zaira. He wanted to believe that this path would lead to something meaningful. But could he truly embrace her vision of family? Could he accept the idea that their children would be raised not just to live, but to fight? He glanced at her again, her face glowing with excitement, with hope for the future. She believed in this with everything she had, and somehow, she was asking him to believe in it, too. I don't know, Zaira, he admitted, his voice low. This is all so overwhelming. I love you, and I want to support you. But I need to know we're doing this because it's the right thing for our family, not just for your species' idea of strength. Zaira took his hand in both of hers, her grip firm and comforting. I'm not asking you to abandon what you believe, Brad. I'm asking you to see that our path can be one of strength, but also one of love, of unity. We will be unstoppable because we are united, not just in battle, but in heart. Together, we will raise a family that honors both the power of warriors and the beauty of love. Brad felt the tension in his chest ease, just slightly. Maybe Zaira was right. Maybe there was a way to build something powerful and strong, and still have room for love. He didn't know how, but he was willing to try. All right, Zaira, he said, his voice steady but soft. Let's do this. Let's build our family. Let's make them strong, and let's love them just as much. Zaira smiled, and for the first time, it felt like they were on the same page. We will, Brad. We will.